Hello my amazing people, and welcome back to my channel. If you're back, if you are new, welcome to my channel. I'm Shayna and I have another case for you all today. Just my usual disclaimer, this is all information that I have found online and compiled into a video for educational purposes. Before I actually start the video, I had a question for you guys, and for anyone who wants to just skip right onto the case, I'll put a timestamp here for you. But for everyone else, I wanted to know in what way do you consume your true crime media? So my last video was more of a podcast style with just some pictures, and it was mostly a voiceover kind of video. But I typically make videos like this where you're looking at my face. But I know, like, for myself, I typically consume YouTube content by just listening through my AirPods and not even looking at the screen for the most part. That's just how I tend to do it. So I wanted to know from you guys, my viewers, who are the main impact on my channel, what is your preferred way of consuming this style of content? That will help me understand which styles of video to continue to do. So I would say both styles of video take the same amount of time and energy to create, but I am able to have a little bit more flexibility with location when I do the voiceover. Whereas when I do these kinds of videos, obviously I'm sitting in front of you. I usually like to do these at home. So yeah, just let me know what you guys think so that I can tailor my content to suit what you guys prefer. Moving right along into the case, today we are talking about the disappearance of Tonee Turner, who went missing from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 2019. This case was recommended to me by quite a few of you guys, and I had looked at it some months ago actually, but I hadn't revisited it because there's a lot of conflicting information on this case online, and I prefer to be able to give you as frequently as I can facts, very clear descriptions when I'm able to find them. But in the case of Tonee Turner, there's a lot of speculation. So this case is a very big mystery. But enough of my TED Talk. I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart so very much for joining me today, and let's go ahead and get started. Tonee Turner was born on June 10th, 1997, and was 22 at the time of her disappearance, having spent pretty much her entire life in Pittsburgh in the Turtle Creek area, which is on the eastern side of the city. She had recently moved in with a best friend and her boyfriend in kind of a roommate style situation, and she was really excited because she had many things going for her in her early 20s. Tonee was known by everyone to be fun, loving, kind, very bubbly, and also a very knowledgeable and intuitive girl. She loved to dance. Oh my goodness, she loved to dance more than anything else, and she always inspired people around her to dance. Even people who were shy to get on the dance floor, she made everyone feel like they could be a part. Like, dance was this beautiful form of expression, and Tonee lived her life to express herself. That is the way that she felt the abundance of life, was through expressing herself artistically, and one of those ways was through dance. People said that she looked like she was flying across the dance floor when she would dance, and she actually dedicated time to studying the form of dance called Kathak, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's Kathak, and this form of dance is a major form of Indian classical dance, which is very interesting. She enjoyed attending concerts in Pittsburgh, and she would often go out with her friends or alone to these concerts just to go all the way to the front and dance. And just the week before she disappeared, she and her sister actually went to a concert together where Tonee danced the entire night away. Like I mentioned, she was a huge lover of the arts. And aside from dance, she was artistic in other ways, and she took to many forms of art from a very young age. She started off by drawing and exploring and sketching, drawing, and then she kind of evolved to painting. She also loved jewelry making and working with clay as well. And she put tons of energy into creating and actually felt like she could not live her life without expressing herself in the form of art. Even all the way down to her work, what she did for a living. She worked as a metal fabricator at Studebaker Metals, and she also worked at a ceramic studio where she focused on clay making. From what I could find, she also dedicated a good portion of her time teaching ceramics to students part-time at a local library in Pittsburgh. Tonee had a really strong personal appreciation for unconventional forms of education, and she enjoyed studying about things like nutrition and Black history. But the institution of education itself wasn't as important to her as the actual act of just learning in and of itself. And she kind of chose a more free life where she could work with her hands and work creatively as opposed to pursuing even more education, because the idea of not being able to express herself through art was something that was very confining to her. So she didn't necessarily have these huge, lofty goals of achieving formal education that most of us are familiar with. She was more so focused on fulfillment in her life. And as she grew into adulthood, she, of course, experienced the normal highs and lows that life had to offer. As she was coming into herself, she did have some hard times, some challenging times, just working through life, but she was working really hard toward finding her future stability and really focusing on learning to find her version of happiness. She had a really tight group of friends who helped to keep her grounded, and her friends all loved the light that shined from within Tonee. They all were drawn to her and the type of person that she was. It was just impossible not to love her. December 20th of 2019 started off like a normal day for Tonee. She went to work at 8 a.m. in the Braddock area of Pittsburgh, and she worked until 4. After leaving work, she made a trip that she took on a frequent basis, actually, over to a tea shop that's called Dober Tea, which is located on the map here. And around 6 p.m. she went in, she purchased the tea, and she left a little while after that. At this time, she was texting back and forth with her sister as well around 6 p.m. For the rest of that night, though, Tonee's loved ones, they didn't hear back from her. And she was a whimsical being who actually was known to lose her cell phone quite often. She wasn't like most of us who have our phones glued to our hand at all times. She was more so of a free spirit who didn't necessarily need the confines of technology holding her down in her life, if that makes sense. So it was not uncommon for her to not look at her phone or to even misplace her phone altogether. So when her sister kind of, noticed that the text between the two of them stopped and no one else had heard from her that night, it wasn't extremely out of the ordinary. And her boyfriend and her other housemate were actually out of town at this time. So there was no pressing need for anyone to communicate with her, and there was no one trying to urgently get in contact with her. Partially probably because no one was actually at her home to notice that she hadn't come home that night. But the next day, early afternoon, late morning, Tonee's aunt actually received a phone call from a man who said that he had some items, and the items were actually found by his son, who was traveling via bike over a bridge that's in Pittsburgh. This bridge is called the Homestead Grays Bridge, and he said that his son had found some items and he thought that maybe they belonged to someone that Tonee's aunt knew. Of course, we find out that these items belong to Tonee, and I'll get into what the items are in a bit for you. But obviously her family started to kind of notice that something was wrong if her items were found, but no one had talked to her since the night before. It was a little odd, and the man told Tonee's aunt that the items were found around 8:30 p.m. that night of December 20th. So that means that she left the tea shop at 6 o'clock, and then her items were found without her at 8:30. So there was a span of about 2 to 2.5 hours that went by. I will show you on the map. Here is the tea shop circled for your reference, which is located on Murray Avenue. And here is the bridge. I'm also going to add a third circle, which is where Tonee lives. She's an extremely habitual person, so her normal routine would put her on a bus that would travel from Dober Tea to her home in Hazelwood. But knowing that her items were found, obviously in the absence of Tonee herself, her family decided to move forward and report her missing on December 21st. Her family, of course, having no idea that Tonee would never be seen again. So the items that were found that belonged to Tonee include her shoes, a ceramic vase that looked like it could have been something that she made while she was at work, her cell phone, her wallet, her keys, a water bottle, and a diary. Some of these items were actually inside of a bag. And this is an interesting combination of items. It seems like pretty much everything that she probably would have had on her person. Her bag, her keys, her wallet, literally almost everything that she would have had, all the way down to her shoes. So her items being abandoned was obviously an odd thing in and of itself, but something that started to make people become even more confused was that a bus driver who was one who drove the route from Doberty to the area in Hazelwood where Tonee lives actually came forward to report that Tonee was on their bus that night. So they said that Tonee was on the bus from Doberty all the way down to a stop on Giddings Street, which is not far from her home, and that they dropped her off around 6:30 that night. But of course, a question that I have is, why would she travel all the way home only to then change her mind and travel all the way to the bridge? They weren't on the same direct route. And also, to set the scene for you, Pittsburgh is a very cold city. And in the middle of December, it wouldn't have been ideal for her to just be traveling around outside. And also, at this point in the middle of winter, it would have been dark outside as well. But aside from that, she was a very habitual person. And her normal routine was pretty much set in stone. When she would get off work, she would go to the tea shop and then she would go home. So it seems that either this bus driver was mistaken and that Tonee never actually traveled from Doberty to Giddings Street, or this bus driver was correct in their memory and she did in fact travel from Doberty to the stop near her house and then decided to go to the bridge, or somehow her items ended up at the bridge. But either way, it is strange. It's just kind of odd. And her family decided to read through her diary that was found amongst the items that the young man had found who was cycling across the bridge. And when they read her diary, they did notice that she had an entry that mentioned that she was a little on the sad side. She wasn't feeling too great. But they didn't think that this was too much out of the ordinary for a diary entry, right? I know sometimes I like to journal, and I don't tend to journal when I'm happiest, and maybe that's a bad habit, but I tend to journal more so when I'm processing through things or I'm not feeling too good. So no one in her life really was like, okay, this is cause for a red flag. Everyone was just thinking this is a normal diary entry. She didn't hint at wanting to do anything to herself. As many of you may be imagining, the thought crossed people's minds of, did she jump from the bridge because all of her items were just seemingly neatly placed there, including her shoes? But her family just isn't convinced that she jumped on her own. The employees at Doberty, who were used to seeing Tonee because she was definitely a regular, they remembered her coming in that day, and they said that she was acting normally. Of course, she was on the quieter side, but she was always on the quieter side, so this wasn't abnormal. And the cameras at the tea shop were of no help to the investigation. Apparently they weren't working, or they were just of no assistance. This information is unclear. Police haven't released this information. But her correspondence with her sister was also very normal leading up to this, so nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Her stop at the tea shop seemed normal. Her correspondence with her sister when they were talking back and forth around 6 p.m. seemed normal. There were no signs that she was planning to go anywhere outside of her normal routine or that she was feeling distressed at all. But there were very strong concerns nonetheless that Tonee did end up in the water under the bridge that night. So there was a search conducted of the river about 3 days after she went missing, and the search yielded no results. And in many people's mind, this was a good thing because no body meant that there was still a possibility that she was okay. Police did appeal to the public for tips in the days after Tonee went missing, and it's unclear if there were lots of tips coming in, if there were no tips coming in. It's been very vague as far as police updating the public on what's going on, but we do know that a tip came in that put Tonee in an area of Pittsburgh that threw everyone for a bit of a loop. So this tip placed the search efforts in an area of the city that's known as the Hill District, and this part of the city is apparently known for higher crime rates. It is considerably less safe than other areas of Pittsburgh, according to residents who live there. A tip linking her to this area would just kind of made everyone's confusion even more compounded because her items were found in a different place and she lived in a completely different place, and the tea shop is nowhere near here. It's just like, what would the Hill District have to do with any of this? And she had no ties to this area. She never traveled there for any reason. And she also usually traveled by public transport. And it's been reported that this part of the city doesn't have as much public transport readily available like other parts of the city. So her being able to just move around freely on the bus wasn't as much of an option in this part of Pittsburgh, according to the sources that I've read. If any of you are actually familiar or live in Pittsburgh or kind of know the area, let me know, just so I can have kind of a clearer picture, but that's what I've been able to glean from online sources. But even though this tip was strange and made everyone kind of scratch their heads, the family did pour their efforts into this area as much as any other part of Pittsburgh. They handed out flyers, they spread the message about Tonee, and they focused on a street called Linton Street. Obviously, all tips are good tips and valuable tips, but this tip didn't add any clarity to her belongings ending up on the bridge. Her items being abandoned at this place that she had no links to was extremely confusing, really made no sense at all, and her family has said that one of the hardest parts of all of this is having no answers and just being totally confused by the series of events. But in a case like this where there is so little information actually known, it puts people in a position where they are forced to speculate, where people's imagination might run wild, or her loved ones kind of have to fill in the blanks with possibilities. And online there were 2 or 3 main theories or thought paths that I saw. So I will break them down for you now, and you guys can kind of let me know what you think is a very likely possibility. The first theory is, of course, that Tonee jumped from the bridge that day, and this theory seems to be mostly supported by the location of her items. Obviously, given that everything she had with her that day, down to her shoes, were found over a body of water, people have speculated that she jumped. And even though she was dealing with the normal ebbs and flows of life, her family strongly disagrees with this because they know that she was doing much better in recent days and months. The bridge itself is approximately 50 feet high, which is on the low side as far as bridges go in general, but a writer online who lives in Pittsburgh says that the bridge, when you walk across it, it feels scarily high to a pedestrian that's on foot. There are extremely high winds as you cross, and it's made worse by the fact that the guardrail is relatively short for a bridge. People have said that when you walk across the bridge, as cars drive past, you kind of feel like you're going to fall off. It's not a place where you would just take a leisurely walk. With this in mind, people may think that she went there for a particular reason that was a grim one. And I tried to research into what the maximum height is that you can fall into water without significant injury, and there was no actual consensus that I could find online because there are different factors that come into play, like how did you land in the water? Did you land feet first? Did you dive into the water? Did you land flat on the water? There was no clear-cut answer, but it appears based on what I've read online was that a 50-foot fall into water could be fatal for some, and many others could survive. So if you're into diving or you're familiar with maybe cliff jumping or things like this, let me know. But it appears that a 50-foot drop could be fatal to some and not fatal to others. I know that's very vague and unhelpful, but I say that to say that there is a possibility that if she did go over the rail on the bridge, she could have passed away from the impact. If she did jump, there's a high likelihood that her body would have been recovered when they did the search just 3 days after she went missing. High likelihood, I say, but it is important to know that the river goes up to 20 feet deep. So it is possible for her to have been in the water and not found during this initial search because it is a river that may have areas that could be missed. If I'm totally honest, I'm not sure where I stand on this theory. I don't know if her jumping was a possibility, but what I do know is that even if she did, she still deserves to be found, right? I think that the searches maybe could have been more in depth, or there could have been more searches done, because even if the police or others kind of have this hunch that this was self-inflicted, that she wanted to disappear, I think that her family still deserves closure, and she still deserves, being laid to rest properly if she has passed away. There's another theory, and this theory is that Tonee was kidnapped and that she was sold into via Interstate 80. Now, this theory coincides with her possibly being in the Hill District, an area that has a bad reputation. If it is true, like people say, it is possible that Tonee maybe met some not so good people in this area. And I don't know if this theory was fully formed online. Like, I'll be totally transparent. I don't know if this is just something that internet detectives have come up with, but I do know there was a woman who did a podcast on the disappearance, and I'll make sure I list it as a source below, where she mentioned that she actually talked directly to Tonee's sister, and they discussed the possibility of this happening. And Tonee's sister pretty much said that her family has not taken any option off of the table. I like to make sure when I'm discussing cases and theories that I keep the family in mind, and that I am not maybe pouring salt into wounds or saying things that could potentially really upset the family. But it appears that Tonee's family believes that she could be anywhere and that really anything could have happened to her. I just wanted to say that before I continue. There are theories that she was kidnapped from the Hill District and that her items were placed on the bridge as kind of a deterrent from what actually happened. And there are also theories that she was kidnapped from the bridge. I have a difficult time wrapping my mind around her having been kidnapped from the bridge, only because if she were kidnapped, whoever took her probably wouldn't have taken the time to leave all of her items neatly placed on the bridge. I'm assuming in a situation where someone is being snatched, it would be really quick and kind of happen in a hurry. So I don't know how I feel about that theory, but it is possible that someone kidnapped her from the bridge. It was dark outside, and it's possible that they left her items there as a way to kind of throw people off and make everyone think that she jumped. We just really have no idea, which is really frustrating, and it's really tough. Something that's interesting to know is that the young man who found Tonee's items on the bridge didn't actually take all of the items back to his dad. He actually left her shoes and the ceramic vase that were there. He left those items, and then he took the bag that had like her diary, her keys, her wallet, and her phone in it. But when police came back out to the bridge, to the location that he said the items were left, they were gone. So is it possible that someone who did plant the items there came back to get them because they were concerned that maybe their DNA were on the items? Or maybe did a homeless person come by and just take the shoes? Or maybe someone who thought that they were cleaning up, did they just come by and just pick them up because they were discarded on the ground? We really don't know, but those items could have been key for forensic evidence, and we have no idea where these items are. Police have appealed to the public that if anyone saw these items on the bridge, that they come forward and bring them. But so far as I'm aware, we still don't know where these items are, which kind of makes me think that whoever could have possibly been involved in this had a hand in coming back to get the items. But even though we have so very few answers, Tonee's family still holds out hope that maybe one day she will be returned to them. That maybe they can use no answers as a way to hold on to hope. That there is no proof that something bad happened, so maybe there's hope that she can still be brought home. Tonee Turner at the time of her disappearance was 5 foot 2 inches tall, 130 pounds, with brown eyes and black chin-length hair. There's also a GoFundMe that was started by Tonee's family since she disappeared that I will link for you below if you are in a position where you'd like to donate monetarily. Her case has not gotten a lot of coverage at all, and it is very sad and frustrating to think about because there are cases where families are getting donations in the hundreds of thousands, and then there's Tonee's case where there is a $10,000. There's about $11,000 donated so far. And I know that if it's literally a difference of attention and coverage. So share this video, maybe go share other creators. There are some smaller channels who have made videos on this so that we can help get the word out there and help people figure out who Tonee was. We never know. Any of us could come across her. and have no idea that it's her and that she's in distress and she needs help. We have no idea where she is. And I don't like the idea of holding out false hope, but I think that it is important to hold out some sort of hope for the family, because that's the only way that people will be inspired to continue to share the story and come to a resolution, whether that be police work harder and get to an answer faster, or we actually find her. I think it just needs a push, and I think it just needs effort. So I'm hoping that with this video, I have done my part. But of course, I will continue. If there are any updates, I will continue to keep you in the loop of things as best as I can. But yeah, this is just a really sad one, and it's hard, and having no answers is probably worse than having answers that you don't want. But that is where I'm going to leave you guys. You know what I'm going to say. If you made it this far, you are loyal. You really are, and I appreciate you. Have a wonderful week. Have an incredible week. Write down some intentions of things that you want to accomplish this week. I'm going to try to write down 3 things that I want to accomplish each day. I need to drink more water. I need to be more physically active. And I need to take my vitamins more. There you go. Those are my 3. Make sure you guys are taking care of yourselves. And I hope you have an incredible week. Thank you guys so very much for hanging out with me today. As always, don't forget to let me know down below what you think as far as the question that I asked you in the beginning of the video. And yeah, I think that's all I have. Thanks so much, you guys. It was nice seeing you again. Peace.